try that. All right. It's not my best mic, but maybe it'll do for the moment. I imagine we're live here. Yeah, that looks live to me. All right. Is Twitch okay? Yeah, Twitch is okay. All right. How's everybody doing tonight? It's pretty special getting to watch the National Open live like this. So endgame here is pretty interesting with two pawns against a knight. My first guess with this kind of limited material would be that it's relatively close to equal or to a draw. Basically, for white to win, they'd have to win all three of these pawns without losing a single pawn, right? Because if black can trade even all three of these for one pawn, that's enough to draw. For black to win, they'd have to queen a pawn through all these defensive pieces, which seems a little bit unlikely. So my first thought would be that it's relatively close to a draw or close to equal. Let's open up the club window here for a second. Check the Chess Dojo Club. Current events, we've got a 1600 plus arena as well. Cool. So I'm going to leave this game here open, which looks interesting to me. And then we'll see if there are any games going right now in the 1600 plus group. And it looks like there's only one game really going there at the moment, so I'll open that up. And it is again a rook and knight endgame. This time 2 extra pawns for white on the queen side, which we can really feel. 2 extra pawns for black on the king side, which I feel a little bit less. So my first guess is going to be this endgame is slightly better for white. So I guess, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Coming in a couple hours late that we basically have an endgame kind of episode of Friday Night Fights for ourselves today. Yeah. Lovely stuff. Let me start with the other one, which seems a little simpler to me of these two games that I'm watching. So let me click over here. I notice Jim 06 only has 9 minutes on the clock, and I'm not sure. The last move was running away with the king. That move concerns me from black's perspective because, I mean, this is the obvious move. Maybe there's something totally wrong with it. Knight check, hits the king and won't let it forward. Okay. So the obvious move is not amazing. What about the second most obvious move, F3? That move looks pretty good. Yeah. Probably that's what black should play. Is F3. At least from like an objective perspective, when your opponent has the extra knight, trading the pawn creates a certain safety for black. You basically can't lose to the knight anymore because white has no pawns. So that's really comforting, and it's hard to imagine white playing G3. And if they did, well, it's not hard to calculate that rook G2 or F2 would win that pawn, right? I mean, F2, the rook has to move somewhere on the first rank to keep the pawn from queening, and black still gets white's last pawn. And if the pawn at f2 is too weak, you could start with rook g2. Make the white rook move away. And then play here where you can defend your pawns and keep them more together. Now, is there some chance that white could take and then defend with the knight here? I'd say basically no chance, because the knight is tied to preventing this pawn from queening. Black's king comes in and blocks out white's king. That looks lost with this king probably coming here in short order. So I think f3 is very, very safe for black. 0% chance of losing, more or less. Maybe a small percent chance still of winning with these two pawns here that are left against the knight. Alternatively, this move here, if you want to keep the game more complicated and try and squash white with all your pawns, although don't really feel major winning chances. But I don't actually like walking in this direction with the king, because by stepping towards the side of the board, right, we cede territory to the white king, who can come to the choicest of squares now. And for example, if white played king e4, now we can't play f3 anymore because the king can take. We can't play g4 advancing our pawn mass because the king can take. I don't see any particularly good move for black after king e4 from white, and that's why, you know, the battle for position with the kings is so important in the endgame, right? You want the best territory. You want to keep the opponent's king away. And so usually we're always looking for the move that puts our king, you know, closer and blocks out their king. Is it a tourney? Not exactly, E-Train. It's set up as a tournament on chess.com, but the idea is simply to play a single game. You know, it's more like a Friday night drop-in classical game. Because a single game will take all night. And yeah, it happens every week, and the links are actually in this fight command here on Twitch. So that's where you can find the links. There are 2 arenas depending on whether you're over or under 1600. Chess.com Rapid. So that first link is if you're over 1600. The second link is if you're under 1600. Also, if you're not a member of the Chess Dojo Club here on chess.com, you have to join that club to get into the arena. That's just how chess.com codes their tournaments. And as I said, this is not exactly a tournament, but that's how we arrange pairings and for people to play each other, right? Okay, Zach's made a move. Let's see what it was. King e4. Love it. And I also love that Zach spent a huge chunk of time on that move. 7.5 minutes out of 24 minutes that Zach had to make this, well, to play this entire remaining game. It was a good investment because every move is worth a lot at this phase right here. And also because the move was great. You know, if Zach spent a lot of time and came out with a dumb move, we might be less pumped about it. But he came up with this great move, you know, fighting for territory with the king. So we love it. Jimmo plays rook h4, which doesn't really threaten much because against f3 check, you can just take it with your king. So I'd say this king's in good position. You could consider putting it on f5 or f3. Other thing you could really consider is improving the knight now, right? Because the king just got into a good position. But I have to wonder if the king here might not be even extra super crushing, right? Because remember what I said about how the kings just naturally keep the opponent's king at bay. The more territory you can get with your king, sometimes their king just can never get back into things. You can really pin him to the side here. So king f5 looks brutally effective right here. I don't really see what black would do next, and also knight here could become strong. I could see this knight coming in with really good effect in the next move or two. So I do love king f5 for white. Another move that looks really natural would be knight d5, improving the knight by moving it towards the battle. But I have to say, after knight d5, king g6, you know, things might not be done yet. And it's going to be very hard in general for white to win this endgame with only one little pawn on the board. So we probably need to maximize if we're Zach and we're trying to win this game. And king f5 might be that precision that's needed. All right, we got Scott over on YouTube asking if anyone else wants to play a game in the 1600 plus group. Jump on in there, Scott, and at least, you know, make yourself available for a couple minutes and see if somebody joins you. I don't really know what Trotsky looks like, Davo, so that's why I haven't noticed it. And Scott, I know that from Twitch, somebody named E-Train was looking to join and play a game for the first time, but I don't know if they're in the under or over 1600. Oh, they're saying someone come match up in 1600 plus. So I think Scott and E-Train, you should be able to get a game with each other probably in short order here. So I see Chess Master Ethan in the group. Taking that time. I like it. You've got the time. Okay, here comes the move. King f5. Yeah. Nice, Mouselip. You got a rematch with your opponent from last week? That's exciting. Kind of fun to play the same opponent from the week before, especially if you've lost a game. Yeah. Nice to maybe build up a little bit of a rivalry. I like Zach's chances now. I mean, that black king is just so badly placed. I could imagine little checkmate tricks coming up at some point, right? And, you know, g4 is kind of losing the pawn to king f4. f3 is losing the pawn to pawn takes f3. Black's really stuck. I mean, they can't move these, they can't move these, they can't move this. It's just rook h2, rook h4, rook h2 right now. It's seeming very trapped is Jim06 here, and that's stressful to be trapped like that. Your opponent is a weather man or weather woman, huh? I know to whom you refer. I think I watched your game last week. But this week I was watching Costa's coverage. Oh, I didn't see a different square for the rook. Rook to g4. It's possible, but it's pretty stuck here too, right? Like if white plays knight e4, where's that rook going? That takes away this exit on g3, right? It looks like the rook might be trying to inch out through g3. So I would want to cover that square. Also, I'm trying to create a mating net at this point, you know, so I'm bringing the knight in striking range of check, winning the rook. If king h4, we got mate here. If rook g3, we could take it or maybe just give checkmate. If rook back to h4, then we can smothered mate with the knight. We got a move already from Zach, and it's knight e4. I think Zach, you know, found the tough moves with the king, and now he's feeling confident and bringing the knight in for a kill. And this looks like checkmate. So I think we've learned a nice lesson here, succinct in just a couple moves, right? About what happens when your king gets stuck on the side of the board. Of course, the king stuck himself on the side of the board. This did not have to happen to black, and we can see how much better king f5 would have been than king h5, and also how simple f3 would be. But seeing the punish on king h5, that king e4 is a great move, and that now black probably needs to play, you know, king g6 or something, and then king f5, and now somehow, despite white having no passed pawn to make a queen with, white can win this endgame just by squishing that black king there. That's nice. That's nice. 11 ears. These game, if you mean the chess.com arena thing here, the games are chess.com rapid rated. Doesn't really, not a rating that necessarily, well, you know, not FIDE rated. But, yeah, great little lesson here. Oh my god, we're going to get a smothered mate with the knight. Whew. Wow. Zach's going to feel good about that, and Zach should feel good about it, because right here, Zach stopped and really used their time. 7.5 minutes on king e4, 3.5 minutes king f5. Critical moves, and, you know, created a textbook. So, or a textbook example. That's not maybe a full textbook. That's just, you know, one thing that would go into a textbook. Let's check our other game now that you've had that as an appetizer. Knight and rook against knight and rook. 2 pawns for black over here. Blood queen will be the first to tell you that this position here looks very much like a sparable position. So we'll put words in her mouth and give her a shout out. Folks, give a follow or some love to Anushka over there. There's a link for you to do so. Black has improved the position since we last saw it. So I'm going to back up 3 or 4 moves, folks, and just catch what happened. Here I liked white's position at this point because I was saying that black's pawns looked a little bit less good than white's. Black backed up the rook, cleverly clearing the square for a piece that can do more with it than the rook, actually. That was nice. It looked like the rook was trying to pressure e4, but the pressure was ineffective. So I was thinking, white's better. But black said, if it's ineffective, let's do something else. So knight c4. I would play probably king d3, first thought, trying to play c4. If white plays c4, c5, then, you know, the advantage starts becoming major versus just theoretical. Now, that said, black might have rook d7 check, just repeating, no problem. But black went straight in with the knight. Idea knight takes a3. Idea blockade the pawn. Not looking amazing for white here. I would want to play a4 to get the pawns rolling, but knight check. King c2. Knight takes a4. King b3, knight b6, c4. Like, you could do it, but you are committing a little bit to sack a pawn. Maybe that's not so bad. What if black goes... What am I missing here? Here? Check. Here, here, here. It looks decent. Okay, a4. Black's not forced to move the knight. Let's say black strengthens the king side some more. What is white really trying to do? Like, maybe bring the king around here, maybe play a5. suppose one thing would be to just fight for this square. I can also keep building if it's not clear what white's doing. I can keep strengthening these pawns. King g5, h4. Just building. In theory, we want to, you know, every pawn on the king side, black wants to get a little bit closer to queening. All of that is called like strengthening a pawn majority in the endgame, just advancing it more and more, right? And we're still waiting to see what white thinks they're going to do. b5 we can take. This thing's blockaded. White's pieces aren't doing much. I kind of want to go to the open file. I kind of can't. Huh, black's position is not so bad as I initially thought when I saw this thing. Black's kind of okay. White traded on f5, which looks heinous, right? Straightening out black's pawns and allowing this pawn to gain more space for black. Rook here defending that pawn. Now, breaking the blockade does not make sense, but I do see that e4 check, king d4, black's not sure what they're doing next, right? So it's kind of like a tricky moment. I would always recommend if white's doing nothing, you could strongly consider moves like this. They look like nothing, but you just get closer and closer to queening before you go for e4 or knight b2 or whatever you go for. In the game, black brought the knight to a4. White defended the pawn. Black advances. And then white gets control of a square or two. Trades. Knight b2 to get control of this square. So it all makes sense, actually. This move might not do much. I guess it's going to f8. Nope. Unless rook d8 to f8 is really good, you shouldn't even spend a tempo on rook d1. It's not clear where your rook should be, better than to just get this pawn closer to queening. You want to improve this knight for sure, get it closer. But this knight is here on purpose to control c4. So let's get this done with, right? Make all that happen, and then bring the white knight back into the game. You sure you're in there, E-Train? What's your chess.com username? Because I'm not sure I see you in there. Yeah, so this c4 definitely looks notably better than moving the rook there. Black could also play f3 as well as g5. I feel like black somehow has come out a step ahead here. In the game, white spent a tempo on rook d1. Black plays f3, and now white goes c4. So when c5 comes, the knight won't be able to go to d5. At least it'll be sent to a bad square. That still makes sense out of rook d1. One strange possibility for black might be king e4. Centralizing the king. You're both supporting the pawn, and we have the idea of keeping the knight, or giving the knight a good square, right? By working with the king. You see them? Okay, that's good, E-Train. So this definitely seems like a candidate move for black. It was the key move for Zach on track in the other endgame we looked at, right? Was centralizing the king. Bringing it into the territory. Let's see, c4 has just been played. It's black who's thinking here. King e4 makes sense. What do we think of rook d7? Rook d7 is not bad. It also gives the knight some more options, and trading rooks is okay for black, but I kind of feel like my king e4 move is a little more special for black, a little bit more pushing for an advantage. I don't know about advantage in this kind of an endgame, but you know, it's making white find some really hard moves. If you play c5 and the knight comes here, then it feels like that allows the knight to even come here and be on a pretty dominant square. And this check, what do we do about that? Probably come here in good relation to the knight. Pretty far up the board. Still c5, the knight can come in. And against rook f1, we can come up and support the pawn easily with the king. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see any reason this would not be the right move, this king e4 thing, right? Okay, we got to move from black. g5. All right, so just, you know, preparing to be able to defend that, get the whole majority going. But now after c5, sending the knight somewhere bad feels very messy to me. I think it'll show the value of the rook d1 move now, right? c5 coming in and the knight getting shunted. So I think it's not totally clear what's happening here. Whereas I think that king e4 move was beautiful. Okay, knight d7 rather than knight c8. The knight could join the battle from here. White's going to be able to move the knight first, and by controlling that square, probably prevent knight e5, though. So, you know, we're likely to see a move like knight c4, d3, and then maybe just g4 from black, sitting with the pieces where they are. One second, I'll be right back. You can tell it's late in that I had trouble figuring out how to walk back from the kitchen to the dining table. That was sort of a challenging find the root problem for me. Stumbled a little bit, almost went into a chair, got a little dizzy. But I found my way back, so all's well. Did I miss a move from white? Yeah. Okay. I expected one of these knight moves. We get this one. From here, the knight's actively blockading that pawn, but it's in very bad relation to black's king. No checks or anything like that, right? It does defend this pawn, which might help white to play king c4 and b5. That's an advantage. Knight c4 has some advantages as well, right? You can have some checking ideas. You maybe prevent knight e5 because of this. Honestly, I mean, I'm not sure. Not sure that you prevent it. But, yeah, knight d3 seems good. I don't know if this is a choice that... Well, I was looking at black's clock for a second. I was like, I don't know how easy it is to choose ever correctly between knight d3 and knight c4. with just like a couple minutes to look at them. You might have to go with your instincts at some point, but Alvin actually has 40 plus minutes. So they could have definitely spent 5 or 10 minutes and figured out some variations to justify which move they wanted to play. King c4 is the follow-up, is logical. That's like the biggest plus of knight d3, I think, is that allows the white king to come up and at him. Okay, black simplifies. Says this knight's not so good, let's just get rid of it. H5 is an alternative, but I can understand it feels like white's achieving b5, c6. And what does h5 do? Knight f6 to e4 doesn't seem to do that much. King e4, rook e1 does nothing. Absolutely nothing. It doesn't just like feel like it doesn't do much. It's bad. Yeah, so I mean it makes sense. Black doesn't have a million choices, so they simplify. Weird instant rook check from white. By being here, you just put yourself more in range of the pawn. Rook here, trying to play this. Rook f7 looks really logical for black, and I'm not sure what white's counting on. They're playing very fast. I mean, 43 minutes, and they just played 3 moves in a row in about 10 seconds each. Classical prep with 8 minutes on the clock is actually thinking longer on all these moves than white by a little bit. Spending 30 seconds to a minute and a half on these moves. Maybe black will pull out a surprise win. It's not obvious what white wants to do after rook f7, is it? Only move I see is rook back to e1. Which you might notice is no bueno. Boom! Look what thinking will do for you. And it's not like classical prep is flagging or spending 10 minutes to find these moves. It's the difference between thinking for 60 to 90 seconds and thinking for 6 to 10 seconds. Really manifesting here. Oh, David Justice says the king can get to e2 in time. That's good to see. That's an important detail. Yeah, nice move, David. So king d3 is close enough. That black will need something else there. Nice move, king d3. One option would be check. King c4, rook f7 with a draw. Not exciting. King d3, h5 is possible as well. Oh, hey, Jimmo. Very kind of you to say nice things to your opponent after a game. No, you're good. You're good. Good sportsmanship is never too late. You're just putting goodness out into the atmosphere here. Even if Zach's not here to hear it, somebody in chat is learning something from your good example. Okay, we got to move from white. King d3. Yeah. So now f2, king e2 does not work. I guess another interesting move is king g5, right? Threatening to push the pawn all the way through. It's the wrong direction for the king, but it could force the rook back. My inclination is to go h5 now. I don't necessarily think it's enough to win, but if you look at the speed of the pawns, to me it looks like the black pawns have 2 extra steps on the white pawns, right? Isn't that true? The white pawns would have to be there for the tempi to be equal. I think the king and the rook are as well placed as white's king and rook. So there's a fair chance black's winning with 2 tempi here. Rook endgames are very, very much about, race endgames are very, very much about tempi, whether they're rook endgames, knight endgames, whatever endgames, right? So my instinct is that black is actually winning at this point, and maybe h5 is the clearest way to do it. H5, h4, just getting the second pass pawn rolling instead of right now. There's only 1 pass pawn, and this guy can't really help it any further along. Maybe g3 is not a dumb move either, though. Actually, folks, right? Look at that move. That I would say is an obvious candidate move as well. Yeah. Hey Johnny, what tournament did you play? 5 wins, 4 losses. Sounds like a big tournament, 9 rounds. I don't know, E-Train. I think 1 or 2 people may not know how to join the tournament because I feel like you and somebody else both said you were joining at the same time and no game has happened. And what is your chess.com username, E-Train? So I can tell you if you're in the right tournament. I asked you earlier and you never answered, but I'm not certain you're in there. Oh, you do already have a game then. You have 2 games already. If you're the chess master. So you did get to play, no? Okay, so g3, the idea is basically to try and do this. Then you're threatening to just push. Right? And against rook g8, I can hide my king sort of in the right direction of the pawns. You got 2 people who joined games with you and both just AFK'd and forfeited, so you didn't actually get to play. Oh, man. I'm sorry. Okay, the move we get in the game is rook f5. What on earth is that move? c6. Saying I will now queen since your rook moved away from covering me. Check given. What? If you wanted to check, this square was possible a couple of moves ago. King c4 attacking the rook. I feel like maybe it's going rook d1 to do the same thing as white, so that on c7 you've got rook c1, but this was not good. Rook f7 to f5 to d5 to d1 to c. It's just too many moves with this rook. It's the tournament that you asked for a 3-week training plan for. And how do you feel like about the games you played or the result you had, the training you did? Do you feel like you were decently ready? Did you enjoy it? 3 weeks went by pretty quick. Ay, ay, ay. That black rook is wandering around. There it goes to D1. So it'll come to C1, and at least white's not instantly queening, but I mean, we just spent 3 moves on that rook, and I'm not pumped. Hey, Trey. If you mean me, yep. I'm a little bit busy. I'm doing the commentary on our Friday night tournament. Hey, Slim Shady. This is Alvin Cruz against Classical Prep. It started with 90 minutes each plus a 30-second increment, and they've been playing for, probably almost 2.5 hours. And now they're in a Rook endgame. Classical Prep's down to 5 minutes to finish the game off. Alvin's got a store of 40 minutes, but has been playing the endgame phase pretty quickly, not really making use of that time advantage. And the endgame's pretty exciting because each side is pretty close to queening a pawn, so it's a complicated endgame here. Do I, in general, ignore random challenges? I don't even see them, Trey. Yeah. This is a pretty normal time control nowadays for over-the-board tournaments, Real Slim Shady. So these people here they're playing, classical chess, what we consider really serious chess. What's crazy depends on what you're used to, right? Like, if you're used to classical chess, then bullet seems crazy. If you're used to bullet, then classical seems crazy. You didn't feel ready as it started, but it went well enough. Good. I'm glad, Johnny. We got somebody over on YouTube. For anyone on Twitch not understanding the disconnect between multiple conversations, we stream to Twitch and to YouTube. So there's 2 different conversations. And we got Johnny reporting on their first over-the-board chess tournament, I think. A 9-round tournament that they just completed with 5 wins, 4 losses, and no draws, and had a pretty decent time. And also, Real Slim Shady, this isn't like exactly a tournament here. This is sort of like a drop-in training game every Friday night. Is the closest way I would describe it. There are a few people who play more than one game. There's different kinds of people. Some are more intense than others. But in general, the idea is to give people an opportunity to play a serious... Whoa! Hang on, what happened here? White gave a check. Black moved away from their pawns. I expected, king e3, helping the pawn to queen. Moved away from the pawn. b5. King d6. Oh my god, and drops the rook, and white wins. And Alvin wins the game. Finally, Classical Prep with the blunder and the time trouble. I would say this rook endgame was super, super intense and complicated, and really shows you that with very few pieces on the board, you can get an incredible degree of complexity and tension, which is a cool thing to remember. A Real Slim Shady, you might fall asleep, or you might enjoy it. It's hard to know before having tried it out or done it. But yeah, I know some people who really do feel like it's hard to play online games and take them super seriously, and other people for whom it's very normal. For people who are going to go play over-the-board tournaments and have rarely played classical time controls, it can be very helpful to play 1 or 2 classical games online before going to an OTB tournament. So we have a fair number of people in the dojo who are training pretty seriously, but they haven't been to a tournament, and to feel more comfortable going to a tournament, they want to play a couple games at tournament time controls. And they'll set up a physical board next to their computer, so they're playing on a real board, right? And I'll tell them to practice writing their moves on a real score sheet, right? This is really good training before someone going to their first tournament. Then we have other people who just live somewhere where they don't really have access to good over-the-board tournaments. And for those people, this might be the best chess they get to play, is just online tournaments. They can find like a serious opponent who will sit there and think for a long time, not blunder any pieces, maybe give them a nice long game, including an endgame. So, yeah. I mean, me personally, I love playing classical games under any format, but I definitely want a board set up next to my computer when I play my training games, which I also play training games online against like the best of the dojoers, right? Because we've got players in the 2,200-2,300 range, and now and then I'll play some training games with them, and I definitely enjoy having real pieces. And I feel I'm able to play very, very seriously, like totally normal level of play for myself. Yeah, I think I play pretty close to tournament level in my training games via the computer. Yeah, of course, I'm always trying to improve. It's fun to try to improve. Trey has an incredible chess club, which is awesome. But working nights, it's hard to go play at the incredible chess club. So then Trey plays classical games through the dojo tournament. Awesome. And Alvin is telling us that they were jumping on their chair, felt like they might lose this endgame. For a moment, we thought you might lose as well, Alvin. It was so complicated, we couldn't say for sure, right? Like, as you said, it's intense. We couldn't say for sure if you were losing or not. But there was a feeling before Black embarked on this rook maneuver here. There was a feeling that right here, Black's position might be winning, because they're 2 steps ahead of you in the race. And this rook repositioning, spending time on the rook repositioning, was really not good for Black. After that, I'm sure Black's not winning. But if Black were winning, it would be here with either like h5 or g3 probably, right? One of these moves. Dang, that's a sad story, Mitt Romney's dog. Chess club shut down? That's real sad. Hey, Shady Knight, you just crossed 1,000. Congratulations. That's great. I'm glad that you made your goal, and I'm glad that you were inspired. Was the video that worked for you the one about making 1,200? Was it the video about like how to become a chess player on YouTube? This one here, right? Okay, so first of all, before you hit 1,500, let's get to 1,200, okay, Shady Knight? So keep following the advice from that initial video. Just keep keep grinding that a little bit longer, okay? You got to 1,000 super fast. So just keep doing what you're doing a little bit longer, okay? Get to 1,200 and then we'll change your training plan a little bit if you like. Ooh, Zoomjaw, you just crossed 1,000 as well? Congratulations to you. We got 2 people hitting millennia here. That's awesome. By the way, Alvin, your opponent, I think, the Purple Leopard, is telling you good game in the Twitch chat. So good sportsmanship from your opponent who fought all out in this long Rook endgame. Oh, Zoomjaw, you made it at the end of 2024, huh? Cool. Very cool. There's some weird green banner on YouTube welcoming Alvin Cruz. Well, Alvin did just play a game for all of us to watch, so Alvin gets a nice big green banner. Hooray. Yeah, breaks make sense. We all play at different, we all progress at different rates and with different patterns. Yeah, Purple Leopard, I did, in fact. Yeah, you can see it on the screen in front of you, right? So, yeah, we were watching it for a little bit. Only, like, sort of a short segment, but, because Kostya was covering the National Open today. So, yeah, very important to keep enjoying what you're doing and not just be trying to grind for a number and then all you care about is the ELO number and not actually the process. Just as, Kostya, Jesse, and I, we have to not worry about trying to make Chess Dojo reach a certain number of followers or subscribers or something like that. We just have to make sure that we do spend our time doing the activities that we enjoy, like broadcasting shows we like and so forth, and enjoy the process so that if Chess Dojo never breaks even, so to speak, or never makes like a living wage for us, that at least we'll have enjoyed the time we spent along the way, right? That we can control. We can't really control like guessing what will people want to watch and what do we have to do to make it. Just like you can't be sure that you're going to make it to 1,100 or 1,200. So you have to what you have to make sure of is that along the way you're doing things in a way that you like. That's right, Zoomjaw. There's so many elements. It's hard to know where you're failing or where your little point is where you could make the most improvement or change. Yep. Oh wow, Alvin Cruz is able to send little pictures over here on YouTube as well, as if it were Twitch. Nice. Nice, Alvin. Yeah, for anyone who's going through a phase where they are playing or studying a lot, then the Chess Dojo training program is a pretty good resource with all that structure. Especially the ones with horses. Yep, Pizza Racer. All right, Real Slim Shady is a 2,000 level player who only plays e4 as white and is stuck in that range. What opening would I recommend you like to play aggressively? You're probably not stuck because you need a new opening or something like that. Real Slim Shady, you play in tournaments. So do you analyze your game from your games that you play in tournaments? You play OTP games at time controls like this 90 plus 30 and stuff like that, right? Have you looked over those games and figured out like where you tend to lose or maybe draw? What's holding you back from winning more games? had a similar question about an opening recommendation from Trey, something aggressive against Peart's modern setups. Trey, I think you can play, e4, d4, knight c3, bishop g5, or e4, d4, knight c3, f4. Those would probably be like two very aggressive setups you could use, right? So f4 is like an Austrian attack, 3 pawns in the center, or you can play the bishop g5 line first. So look into either of those if you like. It's a perk of the shoot. Sorry, I couldn't read that, Alvin. You deleted it too fast. You like early f4? Go for that then. Got another game going, and it is very late for me, but since we're going to try and give Slim Shady some advice, we will put a game up in front of us. We got an exchange French, and Black's playing it a little more aggressively than White here by bringing a second pawn to bear on the center. It's going to leave Black with an isolated pawn, but some extra space in the center, because White's c-pawn is not going to contribute to the central fight early on. Black spends a whole tempo grabbing the bishop pair here. White gives the bishop pair, and this knight's going to need to be improved, probably to a4 at some point in this game. Hey, Izana. How are you? And you already play 4 pawns versus the Alechans. Yeah, that works, Trey. Be aware, Trey, and maybe you already have a sense of this, but let me just tell you, Trey, when you're playing these kind of like aggressive pawns in the middle kind of variations, trying to grab a bunch of space aggressively from your opponent, you're not getting developed super fast as White, right? So just be aware you're trading time, so to speak, or development for just blunt central pawn control. That means in general you're not well poised for a very early exchange of pawns, because you're not ahead in development, maybe even behind in development. So usually when you're grabbing all that space, you want to be able to try and clamp it and keep the position closed for a few moves till your pieces come out. So just know, in any opening that you play, so this applies to everybody, not just Trey, in any opening you're playing, you want to know, am I ahead in development or behind in development? Am I playing for space or central control, or, for a weak, sorry, why is my computer not working? For a weakened pawn structure for the opponent or for the bishop pair, you want to know what your strength is and what you've traded for it, Unless your opponent's given you everything, you've got no downside, then whatever, you can play pretty chill. But normally you've traded one value in chess for another one, and so you want to know what those are. Okay, you analyze your games and everything, but you think mastering another opening might come in handy. Okay. Now, I just want to double check, Real Slim Shady. That means you do it, not a computer. When you say that you analyze and you review your games, you don't mean you turn on a computer analysis and then read what the computer says. You mean you actually sit there and try out different moves and try and figure out what your options were, of what you could have done better or worse on your own. Excellent, Izana. That's good to hear. All right, White gets castled, which introduces the possibility of maybe a little bit of pressure on the E file, some kind of bothering of Black there. You analyze and review it with the computer, right? So that's not really analyzing, and nothing against your idea of trying out some new openings. And in fact, a 2000 level player is a very good player, so it would definitely make sense to broaden your openings and play 1d4. But before we get into that, there's something far more important. The crux of getting better at chess is really playing serious games and then analyzing them yourself. No touching the computer. Analyzing them yourself. So, it means going to some position that you weren't sure of the decision, like, for example, a6 for black, and trying out bishop e7 instead. And playing out some moves and trying to figure out for yourself after the game whether a6 or bishop e7 was better. And why? Which one was better? How did you choose a6? Should you have played bishop e7? Figuring those questions out on your own. That's how you actually get better at chess. It's really like the crux of it. There are other things that improves one's chess as well, but that's maybe the number one thing. But after you analyze yourself, you should check with the computer, asks Mitt Romney. No. Only if you're a master. Otherwise, you should not even check with the computer. You should just do the work, draw your conclusions, play your next game, analyze that game. Maybe talk with your opponents, etc. Alvin asks, does deep study of opening theory start when a player is rated 2000 online or FIDE? It depends, Alvin. You can make it very far without deep study of the openings, and some people start deep study of the openings very early on, and different things do work to different degrees for different people. But in general, anyone at a 2000, most people at a 2000 FIDE level will have done some work on their openings. And I would say it's more of like a gradual thing, like you start learning how to study an opening maybe around 1400, but you don't learn all your openings, right? You just start figuring out one opening. And then, 1600, you start learning a second opening. Like maybe around 1400, you start thinking about how to play white against one or two black defenses, right? And then at 1600, you start thinking about your black defense against e4. And at 1800, you start working on your black defense against d4, and you improve your white repertoire. And just little by little, people work on all this stuff at different paces and at different depths, So there's not one hard and fast rule. But in general, I think there's not a lot of players over 2000 FIDE who don't have some significant opening work under their belt. Mitt Romney's dog asks, if you don't check with the computer, how do you know if any of your conclusions are correct? You don't. They're working theories. But they're working theories that you worked for. So you remember them. And then over time, you keep correcting them based on your experience, right? You keep editing and your theories. It's, as you gain more experience and more data points. And when possible, you try and talk to other strong chess players. Or even medium strong chess players. You try and talk to your opponents after the game. Ask them where they think you went wrong. Stuff like that. And little by little, your ideas get better. The problem, I unfortunately end up explaining this, 3 times a week. But basically, the problem with looking at the computer is the computer will tell you if your conclusions are correct or not, and then you'll immediately forget what the computer told you because you didn't work for it yourself and you don't understand what the computer told you. The computer will show you that some move is better than another move, and you won't even understand why. You could go down a 6-move variation the computer gives, then you sort of think you maybe saw a reason, but you just won't reliably even understand the reason for the computer's preference for one move over another, nor will you remember it even if you do manage to figure it out. So it'll mostly be... So basically, your time spent with the computer is a waste that makes you think like you may have learned something when really you're not learning anything. Just so you know. Believe me or not, I don't feel like arguing it tonight at midnight. So I'm just telling it to you as it is. And you can trust or not trust me on this point. So Real Slim Shady, you can't understand what you're doing wrong. You've got a good tactics level for puzzles. Yeah. So I'm glad that you're willing to give it a go, analyzing your own games for yourself. So definitely give it a go. See how it works for you. If you can, see if you can start figuring out patterns of where you're having trouble in your games. But part of the point is just doing that work is going to make you better regardless of any conclusions you draw. Does that make sense? Like just the way when you do a bunch of tactical puzzles, you might get better at tactics. Going back to your games and reviewing and analyzing out this choice between a6 and bishop e7, just working on that question, regardless of whether you ever finish that question, it's making you better the whole time that you're working. Does that make sense? It's not necessarily knowing, a computer or a very strong human could maybe tell you the best move in this position for black, but that might not make you as much better. They could tell you that in 5 seconds, but would that make you as much better as spending an hour trying to figure it out on your own, even if you never found the answer? You get better because you're like playing through moves and you're thinking for yourself and you're challenging your ideas and you're like, okay, bishop e7, my worry is that when white takes, I have to move the piece a second time, right? But, okay, you give it a try. You castle. White castles. You get back your pawn. See, maybe you try to win a pawn over here. And you find, oh, queen b2. Yeah, white doesn't really come out ahead, right? And then, you try out some different things. You say, okay, when black castles, I'm going to try and hold on to my pawn. I'll trade, play b4, defending this. Can black get their pawn back or show enough compensation for the pawn? From black's perspective, there's maybe an a5 idea, a knight e4 idea. Now you're going to look at both of these moves. As you look at these moves, why am I looking at these two moves? Well, you're down a pawn and you're looking to do something sort of relatively violent, right? You don't want white to have time to castle, play a3, queen d2, rook e1, rook b1, shoring up and defending everything. Right now, this is undefended, this is undefended, this is not very well defended, and this king's on the open file. So black wants to do something immediate, so you look at the immediate moves. So you look at a5 and knight e4. Now, as you calculate a5 and knight e4 further here, you will likely gain some insights into how in a future position you could figure out which one is right. Maybe there's no rule about which of these two moves is better. Maybe there's no principle to learn, but there's a set of plausible moves that if you've calculated them a few times, you're better at calculating them the next time, right? For example, there's a tactical pattern in the Sicilian where black plays knight takes e4. And when you play knight takes e4, white can play knight takes e4 or bishop takes e7, generally, right? And so you can calculate knight e4, bishop e7, queen g4, knight e4, bishop e7, knight takes g5. You can calculate bishop e7, knight c3, pawn c3, bishop e7, knight c3, bishop d8, knight d1, rook takes d1, king d8, or bishop tries to come out, knight takes b2. There's not you guys know there's no principle that says knight e4 does or doesn't work. Calculating knight e4 in a couple positions will help you calculate knight e4 sometime in the future. This is not exactly a tactical puzzle. This is just analysis of a position from one of your games, but it's teaching you how to look at knight e4 in future times, right? So similarly in the example from J7J and Chessmaster Eaton's game, right here with my question about bishop e7, this analysis here is going to give you a sense of how to calculate knight e4 next time around, or how to calculate a5 next time around, right? It's going to tell you, like, what's the pattern. They play b5, they play a3, right? And takes, you know, you're just trying something out. Now you can play d4 because you've deflected the queen that was covering d4 with this trade, right? Notice that in this position, I wanted aggressive moves for black, and I didn't mention d4. Well, in my mind, d4 flashed in my mind. I just never mentioned it to you guys because after d4, I saw queen takes d4 for white, and then I immediately assessed the move d4 is useless for black, right? That's a free central pawn for white. It also was a developing move for white. The queen got off the back rank, so the rook can come out. Also, black's down 2 pawns, so they don't want to trade queens, so they probably have to spend a move now moving their queen out of the way of the queen trade, right? So I rejected d4. But now look how this a5 move interplays with that idea, right? Boom, 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 boom. Oh, we get to play, you know, this aggressive move that opens up the bishop, kicks the knight, and this knight can't go into the center, so it has to come here. Then maybe d3, attacking these points. Pawn takes, queen takes. Now we can't castle because the queen's attacking our knight. So now we're trying to fight our way out of this position, right? And, you know, and at some point you could stop your analysis. This is not something you would calculate in your head, by the way. Slim Shady, right? This is something you'd be playing out on a board, figuring out different moves. All of this stuff is helping you to figure out what are the patterns in a position like this when somebody tries to grab the pawn. Whether you're trying to grab it as white or whether you're trying to think as black whether you can leave the pawn going, right? As black, can you just castle and allow white to play b4? Or as white, can you play b4? When you're trying to figure that out, this analysis you do is going to give you a vocabulary of variations and ideas, an ability to calculate typical variations that will let you make comparable choices in the future. There isn't really any brilliant principle. Like the computer could tell you the right move in this position is X, right? I could turn it on right now. I could put on lines and the computer tells me, right now it's not loading. The computer tells me that the best move for black is a5. Clear advantage for black. Knight e4 by comparison is only equal. The only good move for black is a5. Okay. But you see, if I didn't show you a bunch of calculation, a bunch of thought process, what would it be useful to you to know that a5 is the right move? How do you know that a5 is the right move? The computer variation goes a5, b5. Right? And you don't even know why that's being played. And now after c takes b5, knight takes b5, bishop c5. Well, obviously black got the pawn back. That's not the key variation, right? What you wanted to know was, you know, what about a3, right? What are we doing there? Then the computer points out that after a5, a3, now knight e4 is good, but knight e4 without a5, a3 was equal. And now the only variation is takes, queen d8. It's going to have to be like bishop d8 now, right? Bishop d8, bishop d8, rook d8. This knight's still attacked, and this rook's undefended. So after the knight moves, we'll have a takes b4. It's just, there's nothing you can like draw and conclude from this like one computer variation. And if you haven't even calculated it yourself, it's not going to stick, you know? So you have to practice looking at these moves. But you see the knowledge and the value that I have from the work that I've done up to this point, Slim Shady? Like, I looked at this position and I immediately told you the moves to calculate are knight e4 and a5. And I start going through the relevant moves. So the point is, if I had this position in a game, I have a legitimate chance to find the best variation for black. Why?
because I've tried analyzing and calculating this on my own many times at home. Before, right? Even before what I'm showing you right now. What I'm showing you right now is the crystallization of what I've gained from doing this a million times before. Right? And you might think, what? David's had this position before? Yeah, I've had positions where white grabs a pawn on c5 and plays b4 in my analysis many, many times. So I've calculated these kind of moves, a5, knight e4, d4, many times. And there's no knowledge that can tell you X is always the right move, right? But you can have the experience to know which moves you should be probably looking at. You can have the practice of having gone through variations before. You can be used to going like, I calculated the knight e4 variation for a while, and then I asked myself, what if these moves were already in? How would that change the knight e4 variation? So that's more like what a human skill looks like, and why doing analysis work yourself is more likely to build up a real human skill. Just having the computer tell you like a5 exclam black's better, I mean, how does that ever resolve for you, your ability to look at a position like this and say black should spend a move on a6, or black should play bishop e7, or etc., right? The questions I'm asking, right? Does black have to take the pawn on c5 after dc5? Does black have to take back immediately, or can they afford to just castle? So I know a lot of people have been chatting other things in between, but I decided to try and give a thorough answer on one question instead of getting distracted by hundreds of other sub points here and there. Okay, so Alvin Cruz, who we just watched play that Rook endgame before, says that they do follow these routines. It's similar to what they've done themselves in terms of playing and then studying their own games and so forth, but it's more structured. Okay, it's good, Alvin. Glad to hear that it meshes for you. What do I think is important to know about pawn structure? It depends on the level, Shane Staw. There's a lot one could learn about pawn structures. No easy answer to that, but thank you for joining us. Depending on your level, there's different levels of what you should know, basically, right? At an early, up to 1,000, you don't really need to know anything about pawn structures. I normally have people just practice developing and calculating basic tactics and seeing what's attacked and defended all the way up to 1,200. And at 1,200, I have people start studying the end game, the opening, and strategy, one thing at a time. But, for a couple weeks, one thing, and then for a couple weeks, the next thing. And we have a couple, really first steps for people already in the 1,000 and 1,100 range in the dojo training program. Just some little things like learning, say, a two-bishop checkmate in the end game, or just some early steps. But our first strategy book probably comes in around 1,200, 1,100, or 1,200 or so. And the first things you want to know about pawn structure are such things as that it's good for pawns to be mobile, meaning they're able to move. Having pawns next to each other that can protect each other and that can help each other advance is useful. You should be able to look at a chessboard and see which side of the board you have more or less pawns on. It's very important to know where you have more pawns than your opponent, where they have more pawns than you. Even one extra pawn in an area of the board will sometimes give somebody an advantage there. Those are some of the first things to know about pawn structure that are important. And then recognizing a pawn that can't move, right? A backward pawn or a blockaded pawn. Just as you want your pawns to be able to move, well, the opposite is sometimes there are pawns that can't move. It's good to notice those. Hi, Yusin. Welcome. Sorry I missed you before. Ife Muyiwa. 2100 rapid. Working to improve your strategic understanding. Right. When you try to play positionally, then you're too focused on strategy and you miss tactics. Exactly. What do you recommend as a remedy to this issue? So Ife Muyiwa 2100 has an issue that people at all rating levels have. But basically, when you think a lot about tactics, you miss strategic ideas. When you think a lot about strategy, you miss tactical ideas. That happens to everybody. What is a remedy to this? I think the remedy is to really understand that tactics and strategy kind of feed into each other, and that you actually do need to keep your eyes on both a little bit at all times, just practicing doing that, saying I'm never shutting off the calculation. A lot of times modern players, Ife Muyiwa, will think about strategy in terms of very small 2-move operations, like they'll tell themselves as black here, like I want to improve this bishop, and then they'll just start asking themselves, what could I do to improve the bishop? Can I go to f5? Does it leave anything hanging over here? So they'll come up with like a tiny little goal, not like a long strategy, right? But they'll just say, I want this bishop on a better square. Or they'll say, should I put my rook or my queen on the b file? And they'll just try and pick who should be on the b file. And then to answer the question, instead of thinking strategically, sometimes they'll just do some little calculations, right? Like they'll say, oh, queen b6, knight a4. That doesn't do it, So I guess it's not the queen going there, right? So just constantly marrying the two together by making very short strategic goals and then checking for the tactics that do or don't allow your strategic goals. If you try and think in that way, that might help you to pair the two together a little bit more often. Couple hours of work a day is your main training regimen, yeah. As long as you enjoy your routine, Dabo, I wouldn't hate it too much. Yeah, I think the most important thing is that everybody kind of enjoy chess and not get too mad and so forth. Best book for beginners, Izana, is no book. A beginner should play chess instead of reading books. That's the best book. Black's played a5, expanding a little bit with this pawn. I wouldn't have thought of that as the priority. I definitely would have thought that one of these 3 pieces should be improved. That's my instinct here. Didn't really know which one yet. I think the main plan for white is to improve this knight, even though they haven't done it for a long time, which would like to come here. But black will probably answer with knight e4. So knight's a little bit stuck for now. Rook b8, b3 doesn't seem to help black so much. Пожалуйста, Cancer. I don't know what for, but пожалуйста anyway. Perfect, Izana, perfect. So meat on the table. What makes you prefer black's position here? What makes you think black looks better? I personally don't have a huge instinct about who's better here. Yeah, as I said, Cancer, пожалуйста, but I don't know what you're thanking me for, but in all cases, you're very welcome. I guess an interesting question is, if you play rook b8, make white play b3, maybe you play c4 then, with the idea that bishop b4 could be really awkward for the white pieces. Strategically, this doesn't look particularly good for black, right? Like rook b8, white solidifies their pawn structure. They're always going to have bishop g3, and then c4 kind of not trading for the center pawn and leaving your pawns doubled looks weird. But bishop b4 is really annoying for white. So... yeah, some of the Chernev books are considered to be quite good for beginners, as Alvin says, but I think even those Chernev books, I think of the Chernev books as being books really for players rated like 1100, 1200, 1300, something like that, Alvin, right? Like, I think if somebody's a real beginner, like 500, 600, something like that, they don't really need to read a book yet. Yeah, so in general, Cancer, Black's idea is against knight a4 that they're going to play knight e4. That's the general idea. We can throw in this for white, but this is where you have to throw in calculation with your tactics. Right? Ifemu Iwa is a perfect example, right? Like as white, you want to play knight e4. You want to play knight a4, but to do it, you have to calculate knight e4, bishop e7, knight d2, bishop d8, knight f3 check, and you have to figure out if this is good or bad for you. Right? That's what you have to throw in and figure out. And you know, white structure on the king side is ruined, but the knight is going to dominate this bishop. So probably white's doing fine, huh? Yeah, and there's going to be more branches. Cancer wants us to calculate queen f4 g5. I'm not sure what Cancer has in mind there. Yeah. I think that's the direction that modern chess has gone, Ifemu Iwa, because the computers have started showing people that, like, again and again, grand strategic plans get disrupted by little details along the way. Ife? Ifair. Okay. Ifair. Excellent. So my sense is that that's the direction modern chess has gone more and more, and that's how I think a lot of the top players play now. So it's not a bad way to think, and even if there is another way to think about it, this way of thinking will at least help you with your issue, right, of getting too strategic or too tactical and not thinking about the other. So thinking back and forth between the two, continually looking at little 2-move, 3-move tactics to see whether or not you can achieve your strategic goals, kind of keeps the two interplaying together. Bishop b4, queen a5 looks winning. Okay, so meat on the table, you like this idea of c4 and bringing the bishop this way for black if possible. Today you went to a park and played bullet for hours. Was it a nice park? Did you enjoy the games? The thought of going to a park and playing chess sounds great to me. I mean, I would probably play something like 3+2 because I'm so old and tired now. If I had to do a bunch of 2 and 0 games, I would just get fatigued pretty quickly. I would like to have the time during my game to like check out the clouds passing by. You know, I'm a little bit of a shikamaru at this point, so I would be a little bit more chilled out than 2-0 or 3-0. But if that's the norm, you know, maybe I could keep it up for a few games, and then I'd rather just sit on the sidelines and enjoy the atmosphere while you played with someone else. But if you enjoyed it, then you enjoyed it, you know? That's great. How can you play classical chess online? Well, these folks are doing it. They're doing it, Cancer. You can watch them. So Flava Shaka saying a3 then b4 doesn't deal with it. Well, the issue is Flava Shaka, once black plays c4, there's a certain amount of pressure along the b file. So if you play a3 here, black's going to trade, rook takes b3. Now they've won a pawn, and they're going after your a pawn. And they're going after this knight, which is unseated. You know, maybe next comes queen a5. So, yeah, not an easy solution, right? Have I ever played the guys in the park in Manhattan? Lots of fun. Yes, meat on the table. I think one summer when I was 14 or so, I went and played a bunch of blitz chess in Manhattan. And back then, when I was 14, you know, blitz chess was to my taste. I enjoyed playing hours and hours of blitz chess. So it was lots of fun for me. a3 after bishop b4. Okay. Yeah, so b3, c4. I mean, we need a move for white, Flavashaka. But there's going to be potentially an issue, which we have to be careful about, which is maybe with the bishop on b4. And then a3 from white. Black might be able to play knight e4 in some case before moving or trading the bishop. But yeah, I see there could be a world where when they go bishop b4, you play a3. If they play knight e4, maybe you go bishop d8. And if they trade, you're fine. So yeah, a3 could be a good move to answer bishop b4. We'd have to prepare for it though, right? Like, do you want to trade on c4 or not? Do you want to maybe put this knight on e5? You know, we have to play the right kind of move here. Cancer, this was an exchange French where black played c5. And in the game, a5 was played here, and white played rook e2 after a deep think. So they're going to emphasize the e file and developing the last piece, which I quite like. You know, this move makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not sure of the value of a5 yet. Yeah, and I don't think it's useless to know some of that general strategy stuff, Ife Muyiwa. Or sorry, I was going to use the raccourci, Ifer. I don't think it's like useless for people to be able to look at a position and ask themselves, you know, what's the right way to use this light squared bishop that has no opposite piece, right? It's not useless to think, should it be on this diagonal or this diagonal, or how do I make use of the piece? Like, it's fine to have some ideas of that stuff, especially you can think about it on your opponent's time sometimes. Some things about, like, what's your best piece, or is there a piece of the opponent's that you want to trade or not, some stuff like that. But it's hard to come up with like a 20-step plan and for it to actually work, right? Sometimes I find it useful to think about, like, what's my worst place piece and what would be its best square. And I may not be able to get it there, but, you know, it gives me something to start calculating, something to start playing towards or trying to do, you know? Or if I realize that I can't fix my worst place piece, you know, and here white's trying to use their worst place piece, right? The rook on a1. If I figure out that I can't do it, then that's a good warning sign for me that there's some problems in my position, you know? So it's not useless stuff, but yeah, I mean, you're strong enough to move into this more modern level. You're over 2,000, so you already can look at a pawn structure and say, this pawn structure is compact, or this one, you know, is mobile, or this one is blockaded, and stuff like that. You know some of that basic stuff. Now you want to stop thinking too dogmatically and clunkily, and you want to become more flexible and calculation-y, you know, and use little strategic mini plans based on calculations. Meat on the table, that's very kind of you. I do try to be an awesome man. All right, you're going to the World Open. Sick. I hope you enjoy that. I won't be there. I will be chilling on a beach in Hawaii, just checking out how the waves, or listening to the waves, you know, watching them crash again and again and again. Just chilling out, and then, going home and streaming chess. But I don't have any intense tournaments on my schedule this year, unfortunately. Or fortunately, I'm doing fun stuff too. Yeah. Yeah, Oscar. There's some good fights going on. Also, Kostya is doing live coverage of the National Open in Las Vegas this whole weekend. So we've got some really special coverage of live games. I think today he was covering a lot of like the top boards, some IMs and GMs, and then he was also covering some streamers that he has been getting to know. And he had some people coming in and talking to him after their games were over, so it's pretty cool. You might be able to beat him now, Flava Shaka, yeah. So, Cancer, you're seeing how people can play a game longer than 15-10 online, aren't you? Black's having a real long think after Rook E2 from White. Yeah, I'm not sure what their plan was with A5, so we still have to see, but White's looking to just plunk everything on good squares in the middle, so Black has to figure out some way to finesse that. Yeah, Rook takes E6 would usually be associated with a queen on D3, right, Dabo? That can come into the weakened square somehow. Queen B6 the choice. So we have to see, how does A5 stop knight A4 from being good? Maybe knight A4 was never that amazing. Black can go here, hitting the knight, trade, and then maybe take this way to avoid knight C5. Or to avoid knight takes C5. And this position looks reasonable for Black. It's weird to take away from the center, but nothing really wrong with Black's position after that. Bishop pair solid. White's knights aren't bad either. I would estimate it's pretty close to equal if we got some variation like this. That was 9 minutes on Queen B6. Right on, Alvin. You're welcome. I've seen you playing here a couple previous weeks, so I'm glad you're enjoying the Friday night fights, and I'm very happy to be able to provide some points to you. Oh, shoot, everybody. We had such a great discussion going. I didn't notice that midnight came and went. I have to watch the kids in the morning, so I have to get some sleep. I'm sorry to leave. It's been really fun. It didn't feel like very long because we started super late tonight, and it wasn't super long. It was just a nice little, just a nice little appetizer of a Friday night fight. I gotta tell you, Coach is going to be on most of the weekend. There's just going to be great hours and hours and hours of great live commentary. So I encourage you all to check some of that out. Am I playing the Black Redeemer Gambit? Rarely nowadays, but I played it a lot when I was younger. So I think I've got a very good understanding and basis in the Black Redeemer Gambit, Cancer 03. And not only did I play like the normal Black Redeemer, but I spent a lot of my time coming up, like looking at, things like C4, D takes E4, Knight C3. Lines like this, sort of pseudo Black Redeemers, right? And then I played this gambit. This I've even played in tournaments as a master against other masters. The Winkleman-Reamer Gambit, this one. Takes. So first we grab the bishop pair, Winnower style, but without E5. They can take our pawn, and then we play F3. If they take, which they shouldn't, we get a beautiful Black Redeemer with flowing bishop pair and well-supported center, so we're immune to C5. Very hard to play this position as black. Really not very good counterplay. What else? I've played this gambit here in tournament games, where you play like classical Caro, and then you don't take it. You just develop. Normal move for black, knight f6. Nothing wrong with it. By the way, it's not a trap or anything. And then f3. Again, going for a black Redeemer. So I took my knowledge of the black Redeemer and then, you know, used the ideas in various different positions. So, yeah. Learning almost any opening with some limits, but almost any opening, regardless of how trashy, if you spend, you know, a limited amount of time learning it, it'll give you some themes that you can apply to other positions. You know, there will be some theme about that structure that you could one day use in an A tier opening like the Nimzo Indian. You just don't want to spend years and years of your life playing the same trashy opening, not even because it's trashy, but because you're stuck in a rut and you're not learning anything new, right? So, for example, Black Redeemer. Would I tell somebody not to play it? No, I would tell everybody to try the Black Redeemer with white or black. Would I tell somebody to switch to something else if they've already been playing the Black Redeemer for 2 years? Probably. Depends on their goals, you know. If they're just trying to have fun and they don't care about learning any other structure in chess, fine. But if they have some interest in learning more and more about chess, I would tell them, like, okay, try some other things. Don't get stuck just doing one thing forever. All right, with that, we're gonna send off a raid for our Twitch folks. Looks like once again, my old buddy Esserman is the only guy streaming at 4 a.m. or whatever, 3:30 a.m. So we will raid 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So serious. If you tell me what channel I should raid, Dabo, I'm open to raiding whoever you suggest. This person I've never heard of has 1.4K viewers, so I don't think that's a small channel. Innate Optimist. Okay. Sure. No, I was just mousing over suggested chess channels. I found one called Ozzy Zana. It says chess, no plan, just vibes, 1.4K viewers. I mean, holy moly. So, all right. Go over here, courtesy of Dabo. Hopefully, it's a nice chance to try out a different channel than normal. And yeah, remember everybody, Coastie will be doing the National Open this weekend, so check it out. All right, I'm off to bed.